What is up, math superstars? In this edition of Mr. Peterson Presents, we're talking about how to interpret circle graphs. So there's two key steps in finding the parts of a circle graph. And so if you are given either the percent or the fraction for each part, what you want to do is you want to change them all to decimals. And so this is going to be really important in helping us to do the calculation on finding the part. And then step number two is what you're going to do is you're going to take that decimal that you found from step number one, and you're going to multiply it by the total number of people in the survey to find out how many people or how many things or whatever you surveyed are in each part. So let's see how this is going to look here. And so we have this question. It says the students were surveyed on career paths they would like to pursue after graduation. And the results are shown in the circle graph. And so here's our lovely little circle graph. And it says that 300 total people were surveyed. So let's go ahead and underline that because that's going to be some key information. And our question is how many people chose medical? And so what we want to do is we want to highlight medical. So medical is at 30%. So what we need to do is we need to change 30% into a decimal. So we know that 30% is equal to 3/10 as a decimal. So the next step is what we're going to do is we're going to take that decimal. So in step number two, we're going to take the decimal and we're going to multiply that by the total number of people. And so what we can do is we can put these two values into a calculator. So with your calculator out, you can do 0 3/10 times 300. And it will come out to 90 people surveyed that chose the medical profession. And you might see a question like this. It says, how many more people now chose entertainment than education? And so still, it's the same number of people surveyed. So we have 300 total people. But in this instance, we have to compare two categories. We have to compare entertainment and education. And so what our very first step before we do our two main steps is let's figure out the percent difference between entertainment and education. So if I do 30% minus 10%, there's a 20% difference. And so we're going to use 20% to answer the question, how many more people chose entertainment than education? So in our step number one, we need to change our percent to a decimal. So we have 20%, and that's the same as 0 and 2/10 as a decimal. And then in step number two, we're going to take 0 and 2/10 times our total number of people, which is going to be 300. So in this case, it comes out to 60 people. So there's a difference of 60 people versus the entertainment in the education category. So now we're going to cover some different types of problems using circle graphs here. And so we're given some key information here. Make sure you read all the parts that we're looking for. So the first 200 visitors, so we're going to highlight, underline 200 visitors to the state park were asked about their favorite park activity. The results shown in the circle graph. So we have different things. Camping obviously received the most votes. Fishing received the least votes. That's a shame because I like to fish. And then you have swimming and hiking. They both received about the same. It looks like they're both about a quarter of the votes. And so we got to figure out which of the following is closest to the number of these 200 visitors total who said that hiking was their favorite activity. And so let's go ahead and highlight hiking right here. We can say that hiking is about 25% of our circle graph here. And so we kind of say that because 25% makes a nice 90-degree angle right there. And so for hiking, what we can do is we can take our decimal form of that is 0.25 times 200. And that gives us a lovely total. We could say that 50 people like to go hiking as their activity of choice. So now what happens if you're given a bar graph and then you're asked to figure out which circle graph best matches the bar graph? So here we go. Let's figure this out together. So it says the 6th grade class held elections for class president. And the graph, this graph right here, shows our election results. And so we can see that our friend Rayma right here was our winner. She received 120 votes. Our friend Ishmael, he received 80 votes here, the total number of votes. And then you have Juan and Haley. They both received, it looks like they both received 50 votes here. And so the question is asking, a question right here. So our question is which circle graph best represents the same data? And so we have to figure out which one shows that Rayma had the most votes, that Ishmael had the second amount of votes, and that our friends Juan and Haley both have the same percentage. So let's go ahead and take a look at these graphs here. So we take a look at graph A. Graph A shows us that yes, Rayma was in first. And then it looks like Ishmael was second. And our friends Haley and Juan, it looks like they have the same amount. So we can see that letter A would be our answer, but let's take a look at the other ones here, just for the sake of this video. So in letter B, it looks like that Rayma, our friends Rayma and Ishmael, they both received the same amount of votes. So in this case, we know that's not true from our bar graph, so we cross that out. What about letter C? Letter C shows us that Ishmael received the most votes, which didn't happen. Sorry, Ishmael. But we'll cross that out because that circle graph doesn't match. And last but not least, we have this letter D. This shows us that Rayma was in first, so that's good. Our next biggest piece is Haley, which we know that Haley came in third. She didn't come in second, so that didn't happen. Sorry, Haley. So we're only left with letter A as an option. So this is a really easy way, when you're given a bar graph, to figure out which circle graph best represents the data. So now you might see something like this. So that we have the number of species living in the Brookhaven Zoo is provided with this bar graph below. So the circle graph represents all the different ratios of the particular species to the total number of animals in the zoo. And so let's take a look at our bar graph here. And so we can see that our bar graph, there are 40 monkeys in the zoo. We can say that there are 30 zebras, 20 elephants, and just 10 lions. And so what we need to do is we need to figure out in our circle graph, what does this piece right here, what does that piece represent? And so let's go ahead and take a look at this here. So we know that our biggest piece has to be our friends, the monkeys. And so our biggest piece is this green piece. So let's go ahead and label that as the monkeys. We know that our smallest piece are the lions. So that's going to be the purple piece. So let's go ahead and label that with the lions. Yours probably isn't purple because it's black and white, but in the sake of the video, it's purple. So then we got two pieces left. We have elephants and we have zebras. And we know that zebras should be the biggest piece left over here. So zebras, it looks like, should be the red piece. These are zebras. And elephants is the blue piece here. So we found that missing part, the question mark. This red piece right here belongs to the zebras.